Hey folks, got a quick video of the Dumore tool post grinder in action. Didn't know I needed to use it until I needed to use it, and I needed to correct something on the starter clutch gear for the KZ1000. So let me show you what I did. Alright, this part is the part that drives the starter clutch off the starter gear. So this part articulates with the pins and the springs that are inside the starter clutch assembly itself. And you can see in this shot that that surface is extremely rough, which explains why the thing was slipping. Here's little ramps you can see inside the starter clutch that the pins ramp up on. They are pushed out by the pins, so they're at the high side of the ramp. In other words, contacting the part that I just showed you that was all kind of roughed up. Here's another look at that. You can see the lines in there where those pins were skipping, jumping around because of the weak springs and causing what looks almost like a spline. That's how the pin works when it pushes in against the spring. To the right is when it's fully extended, in other words, on the top of the ramp. And as I push it to the left, you can see it kind of hides underneath that edge of that metal a little bit. So with that, you can see how these rough edges, these lines that are across this area, can cause the jumping and the problems and the grinding of the starter clutch. And this really needs to be corrected. So you either replace this or do what I did. So I figured I could grind this and make it smooth. As long as I didn't take a whole lot of material off, it'll probably be fine. Ultimately, I took off about 1.5 thou, maybe 2 thou, doing it this way. Now the biggest challenge in this was to actually get that trammed in the 4-jaw chuck. And that took me about an hour to do. Obviously I have the 4-jaw chuck running in this, and I have the jaws turned around so I can hold a larger diameter. And in this case, what I did was I put little copper shims between the jaws and the gear, and you can kind of see them now as this thing ramps down from the first cutting attempt that I made on it. And what I did was when I dialed this thing in, I used my tense indicator, my Brown & Sharp tense indicator, and used the inner bore to dial this thing in. And I got it within 1/2 thou on the inside and the outside of the bore. And then I lined this thing up after I dressed the wheel in the tailstock using the diamond tailstock dresser. And then got the thing set up where we could start grinding. So you can see the way it's grinding with the sparks and the sound, but it's not grinding evenly on all the surface right now, circumferentially, because the thing was terribly out around in that area that was all tore up. As I compared it to that inner bore, which by the way rides on the needle bearing, so it's pretty true, and the outer part that I'm grinding now is about almost 2.5 to 3 thou out. So in this shot you can see not the final product yet, but I'm showing you as I go along here. I ultimately bring this down to where I spark out that grinding wheel completely, and it really brought that shine right up on that surface and really trued it up real well. Which you can see pretty clearly in this picture. Not 100% perfect, but it's a hell of a lot better than it was, and I did polish it up with some 600 and 1000 grit while it was in the lathe. So here's the final test. I put it over the needle bearing where it lives. You got to understand that needle bearing had a little slop in it. And then put the indicator on it. It is a thousandths indicator, but close enough. That's why it's moving around a little bit, because of the fact that it's got a little bit of play in that needle bearing. You can see that thing's pretty much running dead nuts zero. Okay, so here we got a side-by-side. One on the left, obviously, is pre-ground, and one on the right is post-ground. Now, you might ask yourself whether or not it's going to affect it, because I actually took a little bit off that diameter, but I don't believe it will, because remember, those ramps where those pins go up, that is not a finite thing. They can move a little bit further if they need to. And it was such a small amount of material, I seriously doubt it's going to cause a problem. But we're going to find out, because the last clips in this video are going to be cranking the bike over once I put it all back together from this repair. I'm still waiting on the other parts to come in, the new pins and springs. Once I do that, we'll put those clips in and we'll verify. Here's a quick clip of the springs. The old ones on the right, the new ones on the left. So you can see that those springs were absolutely smoked. Which is exactly what caused this, because the springs were so weak, allowed the pins to jump and bounce around, causing this damage. Here we are mounted on the crank itself, and you can see it looks a little bit better, because I put it back in the lathe and I repolished it and also removed that little lip, that little edge that was on the inside there, because the wheel couldn't quite get that deep. I did all that by hand and just hand polished it with some wet or dry sandpaper afterwards, and got that to be more of a mirror-like finish, which is really what it needs to be. I have a special tool I'll show you here in a second that I use to hold the rotors of these things so I can crank them down and give them proper torque, which I'm doing in this clip right here. Pretty simple tool made out of a brake rotor with a handle welded to it and 2 bolts and nuts that stick in, and they capture the holes that are in each side 180 degrees apart on these rotors. Now it's time to give it a try. So I'm real happy with the repair, and I'm super happy with the Dumore Series 11 tool post grinder. She's an old girl, but she's still got a few good years left in her. And it's a matter of timing on some of these things, where I just got this tool refurbished and then I really needed to use it on an actual job. That happened once before with the milling machine. I get that set up and I got to do machining work on the engine cases for the old VFR 750. So anyway, if you like this kind of content, let me know in the comments. Stick around, like, share, subscribe, share it with your friends, ring the bell, you get notified when I put more of it up. As always, thanks for watching, we'll catch you on the next video.